Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being with us tonight, whether you're listening to us on radio, whether you're watching us on television, on cable, over the air, or whether you're watching us on the internet streaming. Tonight, we're going to have a debate. The debate this evening is hosted by Martinsville Media and, as mentioned, is aired live on TV 40 on television, WMVA AM 1450 on radio. Now, you are hearing and watching this debate live, and it is unedited. We would like to thank both candidates tonight for agreeing to participate in this evening's debate. They are, in alphabetical order, Clay Gravely, the Martinsville attorney and candidate for Commonwealth's attorney, and Joan Ziglar, the incumbent and the current Commonwealth's attorney seeking re-election. Now, the length of the debate this evening will be for 1 hour. We'll have opening remarks by me, the moderator, and then after that, brief opening statements by each candidate. The moderator, me, will ask the questions. The candidates will also have an opportunity in this debate this evening to ask questions to each other. And in addition to that, the candidates will be allowed to cross-question their opponent. As I spoke to them before the evening began tonight, I'm not going to prompt either one of them to cross-question or whether they would like to. But if they want to, they're certainly eligible to speak up at the conclusion of the question answered and then cross-question their opponent if they so choose. Now, all the responses for the initial questions, but will be limited to about 2 minutes, give or take a bit. And then to any cross questions will be limited to the answer only, and we'll try to keep those as brief as possible in order to be able to move things along. Now, at the beginning of each new question, we'll reverse the order of who goes first. I'm going to rely on both candidates to help keep me straight on that. So, with that said, it's time to begin, and the order of opening statements was determined shortly before the program began this evening by coin toss. Clay Gravely will begin this evening's debate with his opening statement. Clay?
Thank you, Bill, and thanks to all of you for tuning in tonight to watch the debate. I hope it will be informative, and I hope you'll learn a little bit more about me and my campaign to be Martinsville's next Commonwealth's attorney. In just a couple of weeks, the voters of Martinsville will go to the polls to elect a new Commonwealth's attorney. For the first time in almost a decade, they will actually have a choice on the ballot. And I think after tonight, you will agree that I am the right choice to be the next Commonwealth's attorney. I'm running for this job because I care deeply about Martinsville and its citizens. My wife and I are both from Martinsville, and I want to do my part to make sure that it's a safe place to live, work, and raise a family. So I want to be perfectly clear. Violent criminals, drug dealers, and anyone that would do us harm should know that I will not be someone they want to meet in the courtroom. I have years of real trial experience, and I will, as both a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and I will bring that experience to every case to ensure that the laws are vigorously enforced and criminals are prosecuted for their crimes. No one should doubt my resolve to ensure that the laws are enforced and that everything is done to make sure that criminals do not walk free. But I will also not only be tough on crime, I will be smart on crime. And I will use every resource available to me, and I will review each case individually to make sure that each case and each individual is treated fairly and treated equally under the law. And when necessary, I will use jury trials, and I will use plea agreements to make sure that criminals do not walk free. But I will never do anything to hamstring myself or take anything off the table that will prevent me from doing my job effectively. In sum, I have pledged that as Commonwealth's attorney that I would be effective, that I would be efficient, and that I would be fair. And as Commonwealth's attorney, I will strive every day to uphold those principles. Thank you.
That's Clay Gravely with his opening statement, and now here's Joan Ziglar.
Good evening. I'm Joan Ziglar, your Commonwealth's attorney. I have been blessed to serve you as Commonwealth's attorney for the past 15 years, 10 months. I am asking you to allow me to serve you again for the next 4 years as your Commonwealth's attorney. We have made great progress together as I have served you. We have been able to come together and fight against crime as an entire neighborhood. As the entire city works together to reduce crime, we are celebrating the lowest crime rate in 30 years. It takes an entire community to reduce a crime rate. We have a progress that is moving forward. And as the city continues to come back from the low employment numbers that we have had, and as we continue to come back economically, now is the most important time that we have to make sure that we can draw employers here. If the crime rate is soaring out of control, or if this city is seen as being very soft on crime, I can guarantee you that employers, prospective employers, will take note. There is not one single person in Martinsville who has approached me and said that they don't mind crime taking place. There are a lot of people here who are very proud of what we have accomplished, and I thank you for working with me. I want to keep the progress going. The next few years, we will see the new college take shape and open. We will see our children get older and our high schools get better. In order for this to continue, the progress to continue to go on and become a boon, we have to keep the crime rate low. Thank you for allowing me to serve you.
And with that, we're going to begin with the questioning, and the first question comes from me, and it goes to Joan Ziglar. Joan, there's been some discussion over who is most entitled to take credit for the crime rate being the lowest that it's been in 30 years, part of your campaign slogan. Now, without regard to who deserves the credit, the question, why do you believe that Martinsville's crime rate is down?
Bill, I think the answer to that comes from a lot of different perspectives. From the perspective of the police department, the crime rate is down because they have been very adamant about not allowing crimes to take place. They have sent the message that they will not allow crimes to go unpunished. And they have come to work with me as their backup in the courtroom to send that message. The second group that should be given credit for this is the neighborhood watch committees. We have 42 of those. Coretha Gravely has formed all of those committees, and they have worked well with the police department and with my office to let us know what is going on in their communities. They have told people who are doing things in their communities by reporting these crimes that they are not going to tolerate it. When the community works together to make these people who are committing crimes feel uncomfortable being in their neighborhood, they move on. They move to another area. The third group that I would like to acknowledge is that we did not fight over jurisdiction. We asked for help when we needed it from the state police. We asked from the federal government, and we have been able to form great relationships with all of those groups. When I first took office, the crime rate was out of control. We had to form a task force to get the crime rate under control, and we have been working together with them continually since that time when they're needed. And we have hit hard against drugs because that is our largest number of crimes. They're almost all related to drugs some way, somehow. So all of those things come together to help us reduce the crime rate, and it has worked.
Mr. Gravely, usually poverty and unemployment cause the crime rate to rise. Although you've said that Martinsville is more or less merely following the national trend, I think you made that statement at the Chamber Forum last week, we are, according to a story last week, the 7th poorest city in the country. And we've now, as of today, recaptured the #1 highest unemployment rate in the state. In other words, we're close to the very bottom. So, trends aside, why do you think that the crime rate is down in Martinsville?
Well, Bill, it's a good question. The first thing I would say, and as I've said in the Martinsville Bulletin, I've said repeatedly, and as my opponent has agreed with me, reducing a crime rate and fighting crime is a team effort, and it requires a unified effort from all areas of law enforcement working together to ensure that crime is being dealt with. Now, the statements I've made about the reason for the crime rate lowering, I think, are accurate. The crime rate nationally has been falling for the past 30 years. The population in Martinsville has been falling for the past 30 years. And if you look at the behind the numbers, the statistics actually show that our crime rate in Martinsville is some 25% higher than the state average, which I think has a lot to do with the poverty issues and the unemployment issues that you've seen. We're going through tough times. It's not time to spike the football. We have to recognize that there are still a lot of challenges. My opponent points out that we have, as one of our biggest problems in Martinsville, somewhere between 75, 80, 90% of the crime in the city is related to drugs. So I would submit that there is great room for improvement with how we approach fighting crime in Martinsville, specifically how we're fighting crime with relation to drugs. And as prosecutor, I will take a renewed approach at addressing that issue. So with respect to the crime rate, I think credit should go where credit is due, that our law enforcement community working together has had a contributory factor to it, but it's not something that happens in isolation. And I think everything has to be looked at. And before we go saying the crime rate is low and let's just stop there, I think we need to look creatively at ways we can do things better. There's always room for improvement.
I agree that there is room for improvement, but I disagree with one statement that Mr. Gravely made. That is that this year we are celebrating a crime rate that is lower than the state average. That has been pointed out by Mike Rogers several times before he retired as police chief. We are this year below the state level.
Clay, do you want to respond to
Well,
that?
all I know is that the latest reported statistics from the FBI that I'm aware of are as of 2011, and those reported us at over 25% higher than the state average. So if this precipitous decline is a reality, I'm not aware of it.
All right, next I'd like to give, as we mentioned, the opportunity for you to ask each other questions. And the next would come from Clay to Joan. So Clay, if you will, go ahead.
Thank you, Bill. Ms. Ziglar, is there any policy in your office that you think could be improved upon?
Absolutely. Every day there are changes taking place in the world, in the community, in the city of Martinsville that cause us to have to make changes as we progress. The use of technology in the courtrooms, the use of technology with police officers, the use of technology with everybody, even cameras on the street, have left us trying to catch up with how to deal with all of this new technology. We are using iPads in the courtroom. We are using televisions. Were something 5 years ago that were extremely great. Now we are moving past those. Our courtroom has none of the new technology available to us that you can go to Montgomery County and find in their courtroom as standard equipment. So with change, there comes a requirement, a necessity for all of us to change and morph and to move forward. If we don't, we will get left behind very, very badly. I won this iPad. We don't have one in the City of Martinsville Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. I am trying diligently to get funding through drug asset forfeitures and other ways so that we can get some technology into the City of Martinsville, and the judge is working to try and get that technology as well. Now, also, change has to come when employees change. As Donald Goodman announced in the newspaper, he will be moving on. When Donald leaves, a new employee has to be trained, and that will cause change to have to be made with the way that we do things. My policies will have to be adjusted because he was my deputy. He won't be there, so I'm going to have to make changes in the way I do things. Change is a necessity.
All right. Ms. Ziglar, your opportunity to pose a question to your opponent.
Mr. Gravely, you have stated that you would be effective, efficient, and fair in all things that you do in the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. I have had numerous people approach me and ask if you will fire all of my employees or any of my employees if you actually win the election. So I ask you the question that is being asked of me. Would it be effective, efficient, or fair to fire the existing staff if you win the election?
Well, I appreciate that question, and I appreciate the part of the hypothetical, especially that assumes I'll be elected. And if I'm elected, I think the first thing I'll do is initiate a top-down review of the practices and policies of the office. I'm not coming in there to clean house. I'm coming in there to clean up crime in Martinsville. And I think that the approach of anybody that's coming into a new situation has to be to identify where we can do things better. If the staff and the resources that are available to me are something that are going to help me help the people of Martinsville, then I will absolutely keep as many people as I can. I'm not coming in there with a vendetta. I'm not coming in there with some sort of idea that I can't work with the people that are there now. The people that your support staff and many of the people who have been there even before you were there, with Randy Smith, Renee Hairston, who's with you tonight. She's a carryover from Randy Smith. She's been there for longer than either of us combined. So to come in and say, everybody get out of here, that's something that I think would actually go a long way towards not helping me do the right job for the city of Martinsville. So my only pledge to the people of Martinsville, if I'm elected, is to make sure that the office is being as well managed and efficient as possible, and that includes keeping as many people as possible if I think that they're there to help me do the job right.
So the answer is that you will not be firing everyone on day one?
I have no intentions on firing everybody on day one.
Or anybody?
I have no intentions on firing anybody. I'm going to do a review of the entire office to decide how best to manage the office and how best to help the people of Martinsville.
Next question comes from someone from the audience this morning on the coffee break. We asked the people in the community if they had any questions that they wanted us to pose to you all. And so this will go to Clay. What do you think should be done with drug offenders? You get two options here: doing time or utilizing the rehab programs.
Well, the question is what to do with drug offenders. And that's actually a two-part question, because you have people who are charged with possessing drugs and people that are charged with distributing drugs. I think anytime you have a case, whether it's drug-related or not, the first thing you have to do is identify and evaluate the individual case for what it is. Who are we dealing with? Someone that's been in the system repeatedly, or someone that's a first-time offender that got into the system because they made one bad decision their entire life? Or are we dealing with a 50-year-old kingpin? That is the first way to identify how you're going to approach what the punishment's going to be. If someone is convicted of a crime, you look to their own specific background, their criminal history, and all the other factors that comprise who they are to determine what is a fair and just and accurate punishment. So to the question of what would I do, send them to jail or send them to some sort of rehab program, it just depends. I would take the position that if we can rehabilitate someone and get them back into society and make them a productive member of our community, if we can do something that assists that, then yes, we should explore that. But if the crime requires jail time, if it's so egregious, if they've done it so many times that they aren't learning the lesson, then unfortunately prison is where they need to go. But prison, the reality is just a breeding ground for becoming a bigger and badder criminal. So to the extent we can avoid sending our young people, avoid sending these first-time offenders that have a potential to be rehabilitated, I'm open to exploring all the options. That's the fair thing to do, and it's the just thing to do, and that'll be my policy.
Same question, Ms. Ziglar.
Well, I think what we have been doing with drug offenders, and I would add a third category, because there are a lot of people who are given a second chance. They do not go to jail. They're placed on probation, and some coming out of jail are placed on parole. Although they say there's no parole in Virginia, there really is. So there's a third category, those who use drugs while they're on probation or commit new crimes involving drugs or any other kind while they're on probation. So there are not just two categories of drug offenses. There are sellers, there are users, and those who are in possession. And if they're on probation because they have sold drugs and we have given them the opportunity, which we do a lot, there are so many cases that people don't understand, never come to court. I do not supervise Vice. Vice goes out, they make their cases. Contrary to what is being said by Mr. Young and Mr. Rourke, I do not supervise them. At the end of an operation, they bring me a list of cases, case files. We do the indictments. Mr. Gravely knows that because he worked in the office and he helped prepare some of those indictments. So we deal with the person based upon how their life has been. For example, Tracy Walker has been the poster child put forward. It has not come out that she has a brother, a twin brother no less, who has not become involved in drug activity. She sold drugs with her child in the car. That has not come out. More than once. She sold drugs twice within a school zone while school was in operation. She was never a user of cocaine. She was a seller. She was selling drugs a lot. That's how she came to our attention. It wasn't that we caught her the first time. She came to our attention because of the amount of drugs that she was selling. She did not go to college on her own. She had dropped out of school, and she went to college because Reed Young instructed her to do so in order to look good for the court. She was well on her way to becoming a kingpin. She was moving a lot of cocaine. And again, she was not a user. So although she was 17, she was acting like she was a drug kingpin. And for her to be a poster child with all of those factors, that's why she got 5 years in prison. Not because she was 17, pregnant, and only sold one time.
Okay, I gave you extra time on that one. The next question goes to you, so take about half the time on this next one.
Yes.
Nothing is perfect. So if you are reelected, the question is, what about your office as Martinsville's Commonwealth's attorney? Will you change? And then let me ask it this way, or would if you could?
I'm not sure what you mean about change, but as I stated earlier, change is a necessity. There are so many things that need to be changed in the city of Martinsville. If we had the money to do the things that we need to do, I know without a doubt that City Council would afford me the money to buy the equipment we need to do things better. So yes, I would change. When Donald Goodman walks out the door on November 6th, I will change because he is my deputy. He's the second in command. The new police chief will come into office. I will change because whoever that person is, probably Eddie Cassidy or Ricky Walker, there will have to be a need for change. Each person brings with them their own way of doing things. And if I continue in office, which I hope I will, then I will have to change. I will have to adapt to my surroundings. Everybody has to do that. No one can remain static and survive.
I'm going to change the question up just a little bit for Mr. Gravely. You've indicated many commonalities between you and your opponent. So what about her office? If you're elected, would you leave exactly as it is if you were elected to replace her?
Well, again, Bill, it's hard to say what I would change. Well, it's easier to say what I would change than what I would keep. I think the first and foremost priority of any incoming Commonwealth's attorney, especially someone who would be coming in after someone who's been there for almost 2 decades, it's going to take some real time to evaluate how the office is being run and where we can do it better. Now, Ms. Ziglar points out that there are a lot of things that could be changed. There are a lot of things that could be done if we just had more money. I don't think it's necessarily an issue of more money. I just think we need some new ideas. We need some new thinking as to how we prosecute crime in Martinsville. So as far as keeping things the same, I think probably one of the things I'd keep the same is I would keep most of the support staff. I mean, those are the people that have the real entrenched knowledge of how the office is run. And I think that that's where, as anybody knows, anybody that has a staff knows that the better your staff, the better you're going to be able to do your job. So I think the people that work for Ms. Ziglar work hard. I think they're admirable people, and they care about what they do. So to the extent that what they are doing works. I will keep that in place. But I have a lot of concerns about how the office is managed and about how the prosecutors handle their cases. And those are all a result of the way Ms. Ziglar's policies have been put in place. And I don't fault Ms. Ziglar as a person, but I just think there is great room for improvement. So I think that, as she says, change sometimes is a necessity, and I look forward to bringing that change.
I would like to make a comment about vertical prosecution, which is the one solid change that Mr. Gravely has said that he would make, other than saying that he would do a top-down review of policies. I've spoken with Andrew Nestor, who says that he tries to do as much vertical prosecution as possible. I've spoken with numerous Commonwealth attorneys throughout the state about vertical prosecution, and it's nearly impossible to do that on all cases. And one big thing about vertical prosecution is that if you go into Henry County when they're doing that, you will see 4 prosecutors sitting in the courtroom waiting for the other person ahead of them to finish. By assigning one person to do that docket, I free up the rest of my staff to meet with victims, to meet with police officers, to do casework, and to do other things that need to be done. So vertical prosecution is not the end-all or be-all of a better office. It has its limitations as well.
If I may respond briefly, Bill, on that issue.
Let me interrupt just a moment. I want, for the audience, this was actually going to be one of my questions. For vertical prosecution, if you're not familiar with the term, and you all may correct me on this, but it's a method whereby once a prosecutor is assigned the file for a case, then that prosecutor follows the case through to the end. Mr. Gravely, you want to
Well, thank you,
react
Bill.
to that?
I was actually going to clarify what that was. And essentially, a vertical prosecution is a prosecutor that starts with a case, finishes the case. And the reason I think it's so important to strive to have one prosecutor per case is, yes, from time to time, you're going to have several prosecutors one day sitting in court waiting for their case to be tried. But I find that that would be far more desirable than having 1, 2, sometimes 3 prosecutors having to learn the same case as it makes its way through the system. So I think it's how you set your goals. It's not necessarily what's ideal on any given day, but your goal, I think, has to be in any office, especially a prosecutor's office, how do we get these cases through the system and prosecute them most effectively and most efficiently. And I think the best way to do that, and I think it's common sense, is to have one prosecutor the whole way through. One prosecutor that knows the case backwards and forwards, has all the witnesses and victims on a first name basis, and that's how you're going to engender trust and you're going to be able to present the case the best you can. Yes, things will happen. Prosecutors will get sick. You'll have to jump in from time to time. But the goal should be one prosecutor the whole way through. I just think that's the better way to do it.
I think that's totally inconsistent with his statement that he will handle each and every case and give it an individual analysis. If he is going to do that, then he will have to take every single case to court himself. There will be no need for vertical prosecution or any other type of prosecution if he is going to do what he has said and individually review each and every case, because he will be the prosecutor who has to take it from beginning to end. And I think everyone knows that when you see me at a crime scene, the case where James Benjamin Hairston ran into a utility pole and wrapped that car literally around the utility pole, killing a lady. Capital murder cases, other murder cases, robberies. We do vertical prosecutions on big cases where there is a necessity to form a relationship with victims. When we have a child victim, we do not switch off on those cases. We do what we have to do vertical prosecution. But as a daily thing, it is something with a small staff, you cannot do that. Large offices do it best because they have 3 courts, we have 3 courts. We only have 4 prosecutors. They may have 25 or 50. So with them, they're able to do it. But with us, it's not able to be done on a regular basis. But with the big cases and the special cases, we do vertical prosecutions every day.
Clay?
Bill, if you just permit me a brief response. First of all, I don't think the viewers, I think the viewers are smart enough to recognize that when I say I'm going to evaluate each case individually, that means every case that comes across my desk, I will evaluate each case individually. But I will have a staff, I'll have assistant prosecutors, and I will advise and mandate that they also evaluate each of their cases individually. To say somehow or to twist my words that I'm going to evaluate every single case individually in my own office is, I think, a little foolhardy, and it, I think, assumes that I'm not going to be in charge of making decisions in each and every case if I think I need to step in. But I'm going to give the assistants an opportunity to learn their cases. And yes, I think it's best that an attorney, whether they're an assistant or the head prosecutor, if they follow the case all the way through, that case will be prosecuted more effectively. So I stand by my position that I think vertical prosecution should be the goal. And if it's accomplished, I think it's the most efficient way of doing things.
And I will again say that that is totally contradictory to his statement that it will be, quote, the Clay Gravely show. It is contradictory to him saying that he will individually evaluate each and every case. The reality of it is it can't be done the way he says he's going to do it.
Okay, any last comment, Clay, and we'll move to the next.
Well, we will agree to disagree. The reference to the Clay Gravely show was actually in response to a comment you made that that you should not be responsible for the decisions that are made in the courtroom. I'm saying that if I'm the Commonwealth's attorney, I will take account for every single decision that's made involving a case, and I will actually take responsibility for how the cases are handled and make sure that I do everything in my power to ensure that they're prosecuted effectively.
Okay, we may go back and revisit this if we have any time, but let's move to the next one, and this is back to you guys, where we give you an opportunity to pose a question, and this time it's Joan posing the question to Clay. So, Joan?
Mr. Gravely, gangs are forming in the city of Martinsville on a rapid basis. Could you name some of the gangs that are taking shape in Martinsville and how you plan to deal with those if you are going to handle each case individually and you are going to give the young people an opportunity not to go to jail or to be harsh with them? Then aren't you setting them up to become gang members who are used as mules by the drug dealers because they will not be punished the first time around?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what the question is, but the first thing I'll say is I'm a private defense attorney, so I'm not privy to the information you have, but it troubles me to know that gangs are growing in Martinsville under your watch. And I would actually like to know what you're doing to combat that, because if that's happening, then that's a real problem. And the voters of Martinsville, I think we just heard, is an example of how Joan Ziglar's policies aren't working. She admits gang violence and gang behavior is increasing, and I think that's a bad thing. How would I, well, your question was, do I know what gangs are here? Again, I'm not privy to the behind-the-doors conversations that you have with law enforcement. That's a privilege you have, and I hope you're having those meetings. The gangs that I'm aware of nationally, the Bloods, the Crips, MS-13, and beyond, and all offshoots, I know that there is involvement in all of those groups that are coming to Martinsville. And it troubles me, and I think it should trouble everybody, that it's growing under your watch. Now, as far as treating criminals lightly, I have never done anything of the sort. I said I would prosecute criminals as vigorously as anybody. And I tell the viewers today, no one should doubt my resolve to do that. But what I have said is we have to make sure that we are not treating a 50-year-old kingpin like a 17-year-old single mother who gets caught once selling drugs to buy food. There is a difference, and you can't have a cookie-cutter policy that treats them the same. And Ms. Ziglar has that. What I will do, I will evaluate each case that I have individually to make sure that justice is done. And if that means someone goes away for 50 years, you're darn right I'm going to make sure that happens. And if it's a gang member, I'm going to go after them even harder. They should know that gangs do not have a friendly home in Martinsville, and that will be a message they'll learn quickly when I'm elected.
I would like to reply that gangs are not escalating in Martinsville. The crime rate is down, and that is because of the policies that I have in place. I made the statement that gangs are growing, and by that I mean the different types. Young people are trying to start different groups. You see some of it in high schools even, where they're starting to bully and they're calling themselves gangs or cliques. These may not be nationally recognized gangs like the ones that are set up in Martinsville, The gang members are being kept at bay in the city of Martinsville because of my policy. Their biggest reason for forming gangs is to sell drugs, to make money, to make a profit. If you take the profit out of it, you come down hard on them, then you take the incentive for joining gangs away, you discourage young people from joining these gangs, and to say that my cookie cutter policy is one that should not be followed. By the way, drug kingpins are sent federal. They are not kept on the state level, so that is different than the policy I have of demanding jury trials for sellers who are not kingpins. Tracy Walker was treated as a seller. She did not go to the federal court, where I send almost all of my drug kingpins. So the gangs are not escalating out of control, but there are a lot of young people who are in love with the idea of belonging. And we are fighting every day to find out what these codes are. We're getting their Bibles, as they call them, their own language that they're creating. And we're doing a lot of that with Facebook. We're doing a lot of that with Twitter. And we're following them. So we are shutting them down before they can get started. But they are trying to grow. They are growing in number. They're not able to get off the ground because we are keeping a good, close eye on them.
You want to react, Clay?
Bill, I will leave it up to the viewers to decide if Ms. Ziglar's answer makes sense. She says the gangs are growing in Martinsville, but we're moving forward in the right direction. I just unfortunately don't think that jives. Of course we have to get to these young kids. I've been talking about that since the day I announced. I work with young children every day who get involved with the criminal justice system, and it breaks my heart to see them get wrapped up in a vicious cycle where they can't get out, and the only thing that happens to them is someone puts a boot on their neck and doesn't give them a chance. If I'm Commonwealth's attorney, they are going to realize that their actions have consequences, and they will learn the right lessons the first time. But I will also be there. I will not turn my back on that young person who has a chance to get out. I will be in the schools. I'll be wherever I need to be to talk about the consequences of crime. Now, if you want to talk about gangs and gang-related crime, you are going to have to talk to the experts, and those, fortunately, are on our police force, and I will work closely with them every day to fight and reduce, apparently, the growing gang activity in Martinsville.
And the gang experts are on the police force because I have worked with them, Dawn Vaughn, Richard Barrow, to get them qualified. I have sent them to a school, asked them to go. Mike Rogers worked with me to get them qualified as gang experts. Dawn Vaughn is doing a great job, as well as Richard Barrow, because we insisted. Gangs has been my mantra from day one. I will fight them even when they said we didn't have a gang problem. I was preaching, we can't let them get started. There are going to be a lot of people paroled who are coming out of prison, and they are gang members. We know where they are. And this is something Mr. Gravely should know something about. He says he's an experienced prosecutor. He worked in my office for 2 years almost, so he should know a lot about this and why he doesn't. Plus, he's working with defendants who are gang members. And they're the ones who are putting their boot on the necks of these young people, even elementary kids they're in elementary school, they're trying to recruit them. They're putting their boot on the necks of these kids, holding them down, pulling them into drug activity, gang activity. They're the ones causing the problems, and they're the ones who need to be dealt with seriously. That's what my office does. That's what my office will continue to do.
Clay, if you want to make a brief response, you can, and then after that, if you will, and the next question is for you to Ms. Ziglar.
I don't think there's anything else to say. We've heard Ms. Ziglar said that gang activity is growing. It's growing on her watch, and I think that's an unfortunate admission. But if I'm elected, I'm going to do everything I can to bring it down. So I'll move forward on that. My question to Ms. Ziglar is, Ms. Ziglar, you've stated that you think plea agreements are an important tool in the prosecutor's toolbox. If that is the case, then why have you pledged to reduce them?
Because when I took office, the first time I campaigned, I took office under an oath to the voters that I would reduce the number of plea agreements because my predecessor, Mr. Smith, offered plea agreements in every single case, even when the defense attorney did not request them, when the defendant did not request them. That was his standard practice. So it was something that had to be done. Plea agreements are a tool. I use them. I develop informants with them. I get people to work with the police with them, with my office with them. We use plea agreements when they're necessary, but it's also a tool that lazy prosecutors use when they don't want to come into work on a Saturday or they don't want to come to work on a holiday. They use plea agreements because it cuts down on the amount of work they have to do. Plea agreements are a necessity, and I use them when they are necessary, but I will not use them as a way to manage my caseload or to be a lazy prosecutor. I have had to work hard all of my life, and I have no problem with continuing to work hard and not use plea agreements to be lazy.
Next question comes from
Can I respond briefly?
You certainly can. Go ahead.
And I appreciate that you don't want to be lazy, and I, more than anyone, do not want to be lazy. But I think that the issue and the question is, if plea agreements are so useful and they should be part of the toolbox, I'm still unclear as to why they should be reduced. If they are the difference between a criminal walking free because you have a weak case or achieving some level of justice, then I don't understand why they have to be maligned. I'm not saying to use them so you can stay home on a Saturday. If you have to be in work on a Saturday, you better get there. But I'm just saying those are part of your toolbox. Why would you take them out of the toolbox?
No one has taken them out of the toolbox. As I have said numerous times and you refuse to hear, I use plea agreements when I think they are necessary. And I'm glad that you have pointed out once again that plea agreements will be used by you as often as possible because, again, I make it clear that when you use plea agreements, you can fudge a lot. You don't have to do a whole lot of work to sit down with a law buddy over lunch or come into your office, close the door, shake hands, slap each other on the back and say, this is what I want to see happen. Oh, great, I agree with you. And the case is done in a day when you don't have to do any more research, you don't have to do any more follow-up, and the victim is left sitting there. Little has been said about victims. Well, there has been nothing said about asking a victim how they feel about a case or whether they want a plea agreement or whether they want a jury trial. I go to them. I do not enter into any agreement without consulting a victim unless something blows up on me in the courtroom. I want to know what those victims feel, and I will continue to push for jury trials when I think they're necessary because I don't want this to be the Joan Ziglar show. I don't think it should be the Clay Gravely show. I think the citizens of Martinsville who elect us are important enough that they should have input, and using consistently plea agreements to avoid that is something that should not be done.
If I could end the filibuster briefly, she brings up the issue of victims. First of all, it's a fiction that I've said I want to use plea agreements as much as possible. That's not true, and I don't think you should be putting words in my mouth. What I've said is plea agreements should be used as a tool in the toolbox to make sure that justice is done. What do you think a victim wants to hear? I'm sorry, I took this case to trial because it was weak and I wanted to just make sure that all the facts were aired and this guy walked free, or I used a tool like a plea agreement and this guy's going to jail for 10 years. That's what a victim is concerned about, and that's what I'm going to use plea agreements for. Not case management, not to bring down the number of hours that I have to work during a week, to concoct this fiction that somehow I am going to be not trying to do everything I can about the voters, about the people of Martinsville. I don't think is fair, and I don't appreciate it. And I want everybody to know that I'm not going to use plea agreements as much as possible. I'm going to use them when I think they're necessary to protect you.
And I have to say this, Bill, if a case is that weak that you have to use a plea agreement in order to get a conviction, now, it's been stated that I want to get as many convictions as possible. If a case is that weak, it shouldn't go to trial. Maybe that person is actually innocent, and if you want to be fair, and if you can't find a sufficient amount of evidence to convict them in a trial, why browbeat them into signing off on a plea agreement if your case is that weak? Let it go to court. Let it air. Maybe that person is actually innocent, and they should walk.
Next question goes to Clay Gravely, and this comes from the audience. And of all the questions that's been asked and the issues that we've tackled or heard tackled in this entire campaign for both of you, I haven't heard this one from anybody. So understand that we understand that you don't make the laws. What we're asking here is for any personal opinion you may have on it. Since it's been stated that 80%, and this goes to Clay first, that 80% of the crime in Martinsville is either directly or indirectly related to illegal drug activity. Prohibition didn't work. Recognizing that a Commonwealth's attorney does not make the laws, have either of you given any thought to the legalization of drugs and how that might affect us? If so, what's your opinion? Clay?
Well, my opinion on that is I think it's an important conversation to have, but I think it's dangerous to accept the fact that drugs in somehow, some way should be a part of society. I don't think we should be doing anything to encourage drug use or drug distribution or anything of that nature. As prosecutor, I'm not going to advocate for lenient drug laws. I'm not going to advocate for reduced sentences for drug offenders. I think the laws, the way they are fine. I think they can be applied a little more effectively. They can be applied a little more fairly. But I'm certainly not going to stand here and say that as a prosecutor, I'm going to encourage drug laws to just vanish. As Eric Holder, the Attorney General of the United States, has pointed out, however, we have a real logistical problem in this country. There are a lot of people in prison for drug offenses, and most of them that Eric Holder is speaking about are in the federal system, and they get severe penalties for drug offenses, and they go to jail for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. In Martinsville, under Ms. Ziglar's policy, frequently drug offenders, whether they're a 17-year-old or a 50-year-old kingpin, they're getting treated the same. And I think that's where there's great room for improvement. Because I think whether or not you have a drug law that is soft or lenient, it's how the prosecutor applies that law and makes sure that the fair result is reached. We can be tough, but we also have to be smart. And for someone that is has the ability to be rehabilitated, we have to do everything we can to make sure they are. So whether it's stiffer drug penalties, more jury trials, less plea agreements, more plea agreements, you have to be able to adapt and employ every policy to make sure that your job is being done right. I've served as a prosecutor and a defense attorney. I've seen both sides of the criminal justice system, so I'm confident I have the skills and the ability to do that job right on day one.
Well, as Mr. Growley has stated, he's putting words in my mouth. I have said that I treat drug kingpins differently, and the record would bear it out that drug kingpins go to federal court. State court is not federal court, and demanding a jury trial is different. Now, back to your question. No, I would not push for the legalization of illegal drugs. But, Bill, we have the problem that you are talking about without even recognizing. Most people don't recognize that prescription drugs, which are already legal if you have them by prescription, they are taking over. Illegal drugs are going into the background now. So we have that exact problem. And I think that is something that you can look to as to an answer for your question. Legalizing cocaine or marijuana is not going to help because pills, when you have a prescription, are legal, and now they're being sold to other people. People are not getting the same high once they use them several times. They want something higher and stronger. So looking at the trends that are being set by prescription pills, you see what will happen if you legalize marijuana or cocaine. Because once you legalize it, it's only going to make, if you legalize marijuana, people will smoke it, and then they're going to look for a bigger high at the next drug level. And that's what's happening with prescription pills. They are looking for, Xanax doesn't do it for them anymore. They want Oxycontin. They want morphine. The same will happen if we legalize illegal drugs.
Moving on to the next question, and this would be to Ms. Ziglar. We haven't heard anything about the use of forfeitures in the city. For you, Ms. Ziglar, what has been your use and application of forfeitures as the Commonwealth's attorney, and what is your position regarding applying the forfeiture rules?
I have been working very diligently with the police department. Again, forfeiture is when you take away a weapon or something used in the commission of a crime, or in drug cases, you take away the money that has been gained from selling drugs. So if you can take away the tools from drug dealers, which is the money that they use, they give grocery lists to young people and say, go to the store and get these things for me. I want to have a cookout. Well, if you take away the incentive, which is the money, then hopefully you will deter drug dealers. I use the asset forfeiture laws as often as we can where it is legitimate. But there are a lot of roadblocks to taking away people's money because many times drug dealers are very smart. They don't put anything in their names. If they're selling out of a house, normally it's a rental property. If they are driving around in the car, it's usually in their mother's, sister's, brother's name, not in their own name. But we do push as hard as we can to take away the things that they buy with the drug money, to take away the money itself if we catch them with large amounts of money or small amounts of money, that we can say, you have our drug money. We gave you that $100 bill in our drug buy because we wrote down the serial numbers, so we know it's drug money. You can't say that you earned that by cutting grass. So whenever we can use asset forfeitures, we do. That money is brought back into the city through the police department, and my office gets a share as well. And I use it to buy equipment. I use it to hire any expert. Sometimes when the court says, no, we can't have an expert, we'll use asset forfeiture money. We've done that a couple of times. We've had to, on one occasion, pay to get a witness here from out of state. The Supreme Court would not approve that. We paid for it with asset forfeiture money. That money is used through the police department to buy equipment, radios, in-car cameras, body cams. Asset forfeiture is paying for a lot of good things for the city of Martinsville and the police department as well as my office. And we have a laptop thanks to drug asset forfeiture money.
Clay, would you adopt a similar procedure, continue the way it's being done, or do you have a different position regarding the application of forfeiture?
Well, to be perfectly honest, Bill, until I'm elected, until I'm in that office, I'm not going to know exactly sure how they're doing it. I can't actually speak to how they're doing it. I would hope that they're pursuing it as much as possible. Ms. Ziglar says she is. Once I get in there, we'll see.
Well, there you go.
Well, I would like to follow up.
Sure.
Mr. Gravely was in my office for 2 years. If he doesn't know that, he should know it.
Well,
he prosecuted drug cases. He should have done some civil asset forfeiture cases in that group of drug cases that he did, so he should know something about this.
Well, I didn't say I didn't know anything about it. I did work for you, and I was involved in civil forfeiture. And the cases that I pursued vigorously. I'm just saying if there's a better way to do it, I'm sure that that I will take that into review. Joan, you keep pointing out that I work for you. That is true, and I enjoyed being a prosecutor. That's why I look forward so much to being Commonwealth's attorney.
Well, when you left, you came to my home and you resigned, and you called all Commonwealth's attorneys one-trick ponies, and you stated that you did not want to be a one-trick pony because all we did was criminal law, and you wanted to learn to do other types of law. You resigned, you walked away from it, so I'm not sure when you fell in love with prosecuting, but when you left the office and resigned, you said we were one-trick ponies.
Well, Joan, I reject that comment. I deny it. I never said it. And what I will say is, Joan, it sure took you a long time to figure out that you wanted to be a prosecutor. You went through all manners of different career moves, jumping from child enforcement to being a defense attorney, and it took you a long time to get there. I don't think anyone should be criticized for pursuing their career goals. My decision was to leave the office where I felt that I was restricted in how I could handle my own cases. I felt that there was an opportunity for me to learn how to prosecute cases better by learning the other side of the trade. And the voters of Martinsville will decide whether or not I have the experience and skills to do it. And I think they'll know that I'm fully capable.
Well, you did make the statement. You made it sitting right there in my living room, and I stand by that. And if I am a one-trick pony, then I will say you're War Admiral and I'm Seabiscuit.
I don't know what that means.
On that note, we are at the end of the line, and I guess to many folks, there's still unanswered questions. But we do thank you both, one and all, for being here this evening and for allowing us to pose questions and for you allowing us to see you interact with each other. That's very important to voters, and we're very appreciative of it. Each candidate now at the closing time will have an opportunity to make a closing statement, and Mr. Gravely opened tonight's debate, so Joan Ziglar will close first. Joan?
To the voters, I will tell you that I have worked diligently to make sure that the city of Martinsville has the best prosecutor they can possibly have. I will say to you without doubt, without hesitation, that in me you have the best prosecutor you can have. Yes, I love Mr. Gravely. He is my friend. We differ on a lot of things. But as a prosecutor, you have to be willing to take the hard knocks when defense attorneys come to you and they want to be your friend and they want you to say yes to everything. You have to have the fortitude to say no, because that's not what is important and what is best for the city of Martinsville. As a prosecutor, I have used every tool in the toolbox, plea agreements, jury trials, and I will not stop using those tools, because everything works together to make you the best prosecutor you can be. I have gone out in the middle of the night. I have gone out in rain. I've gone out in snow. I've gone out when it's hot. I have crawled through filth. I have done everything I can possibly do. Crawl through bloody scenes where murders have taken place. I've seen some really, truly ugly things as a chief prosecutor. My opponent has not seen a lot of those things yet, and I think that there is some naivete in him because he's not had to experience those things. He's not had to sit with a victim who has been raped. He has not had to sit with someone who's afraid of their own child because of drugs. He has not had to sit and talk with these people whose loved one was shot dead because of some stupid stray bullet coming into a place where that person had the right to be. When you see this on a daily basis, and prosecutors get to see the ugly side of people on a regular basis, it has an impact on you. And if Mr. Gravely is elected Commonwealth's attorney, I pray to God that he will stand firm and fight crime as hard as I have done. Instead of challenging my policies, I agree that in the beginning he may start out being a little more lenient, but he will be a Joan Ziglar before the process is all over. And I stand by saying I'm proud of what I have accomplished as Commonwealth's attorney. I have a working relationship with thousands of law enforcement agencies and even with the White House. And I am so proud and thankful to be your Commonwealth's attorney. And I hope that you will vote for me again on November 5th. Thank you.
Clay?
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, citizens of Martinsville, for hearing us tonight. I think it's been informative, and you've gotten a little bit of a taste on what our perspectives are. I respect Ms. Ziglar, I really do, and I think she's a good person. Unfortunately, I think this was kind of a low moment for her to malign my intentions for seeking this job. I've been doing this for almost a year. I've put my family through hell and back trying to work hard to convey to the citizens of Martinsville that I think there's a better way of doing things. Sure, I have problems with Ms. Ziglar's policies. That's okay. That's what progress is identifying areas where there is weakness and addressing them civilly, and doing so with the best interests of Martinsville in mind. I have taken a step-by-step approach during this campaign and pointed out what I think are the real policy differences between us. I have not made it personal. I have not been vindictive. And I have not tried to make some sort of dig about something that doesn't matter to the people of Martinsville. What matters to the people of Martinsville is that every 4 years, they get to choose their Commonwealth's attorney. They get to decide who will best carry them forward into the future. As far as my experience is concerned, I am proud of the experience I bring to this job on day one. I have years of experience as both a prosecutor and a defense attorney. I will not be an unknown in any shape or form as Ms. Ziglar was when she started. You will know what you're getting. You're getting experience, and you're getting a heartfelt desire to protect the citizens of Martinsville. And anybody that would try to take that away from me or call that into question does not know me, and they do not know my intentions. Violent criminals, drug dealers, anyone that would do us harm, you do not want to see me in the courtroom. The citizens of Martinsville will not go unprotected on my watch. And I appreciate your support and considering your vote in November. Thank you.
And that will conclude this evening's debate. Again, this debate has been hosted by Martinsville Media, airing on TV 40 and on WMVA AM 1450. Once again, we would like to thank our candidates for participating, and we wish you both the best in the upcoming election. And we also would like to thank Jamie Walker as well for producing tonight's program. And we thank you, our viewers and our listeners, for giving yourself the opportunity to make an informed decision on November the 5th. And it's our hope that you've registered to vote. It's also our hope that you'll exercise that right on November the 5th. Have a good evening.